everyone, I'm Dr. Surbhi Uniyal and I teach philosophy at the School of Liberal Arts, Bennett University. We are doing a lecture series on Indian knowledge system. In today's lecture, we will be discussing about the significance of knowledge in the Indian knowledge system. So to begin with, what is really knowledge? Take a moment to think about this. When you say, I know something, what exactly do you mean? Is it the same as saying, I believe something or I think something? What's the difference between knowledge and mere opinion? These questions have occupied philosophers across all cultures and time periods. Today, we are going to explore how Indian intellectual traditions have approached these questions in different ways. To begin with, let us first discuss the epistemology or the study of knowledge from the Western perspective. So, in the Western epistemology, since Plato, knowledge has often been defined as justified true belief. This means that for something to count as knowledge, three conditions must be met. First, you must believe it. Second, it must be always true. Third, you must have good justification or reason for believing in that. And these are the three conditions onto which one could say that this is my justified true belief, which will then be considered as knowledge. Let us try to understand it with a simple example. Suppose if I believe it's raining outside because I see rain falling and it is in fact raining, then I have knowledge about it being raining. But if I merely guess it's raining without evidence, even if I happen to be right, that's not knowledge, but a lucky belief, because it has, what you believe has correspondent to what is actually happening in the world, but we do not have sufficient evidence, or we did not provide any evidence or reason in order to substantiate what we believe in. So this framework has been refined and challenged over centuries of Western philosophy, generating questions about what count as justification, whether knowledge requires certainty. How can we know anything about the external world? And whether there are different types or levels of knowledge. So there has always been a debate onto this parameter onto which we are saying that something is considered as knowledge based on justified true belief. So what is it that counts as justification is in itself debatable. So if we now come back to Indian philosophical tradition, they have addressed these same basic issues while creating unique frameworks of their own. It's crucial to realize that Indian philosophy takes epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, very seriously. So the Indian philosophers were deeply concerned with practical questions like how can we navigate life successfully? How can we achieve our goals? How can we attain liberation from sufferings? All of these require reliable knowledge. If our knowledge is faulty, our actions will be misdirected and we'll continue to suffer. So, epistemology is not just an intellectual exercise. In fact, it's foundational to living well and achieving spiritual realization. And we will discuss in the lecture further that how knowledge is being associated with this spiritual realization, how different schools of Indian philosophy has emphasized on the importance of knowledge as a means to liberation. So, Gyan or knowledge is not merely this intellectual exercise. In fact, it has deeper motives of leading one to the spiritual realization. So, every major Indian philosophical school begins by establishing its theory of Praman, which are the means of or instruments of valid knowledge. Before debating on the metaphysical questions about the nature of reality or ethical questions about how to live, Indian philosophers first established how we can know anything at all. So, we can see that the importance of epistemology lies in the sense of creating a foundation for other disciplines of philosophy or the sense of inquiry into the metaphysical questions about the reality or the ethical questions about how to live a life. So, to first know or to have knowledge, what is important for the Indian philosophers is to talk about the means or the instruments of valid knowledge, which are known as Praman. And once we adopt these means of knowledge, that is when we get valid knowledge. So, means Praman leads to knowledge which is Prama. So, the term Praman, it comes from the root Prama, which means valid knowledge or correct cognition. And Praman refers to the instrument or means that produces this valid knowledge. Different schools of Indian philosophy recognize different number of Pramans, ranging from 1 to 8 depending on the school. So, we can see the close connection between knowledge and the means of valid knowledge. Because to get valid knowledge, one needs to adopt the correct means. If the means are correct, one would definitely lead to valid knowledge, which is Prama. So, this word Praman has come from this term Prama, which is the means to valid knowledge. Now, Praman are of different kinds, and the major Pramans are Pratyaksh, which is direct perception, Anuman, which is inference, Upaman is comparison, Shabd is authoritative testimony, Arthapatti is presumption, and Anupalabdhi, which is non-perception. These are considered to be the major Praman or the major valid means of cognition or knowledge. Going further into understanding these different types of Praman, let us discuss with the first and the most fundamental Praman, that is Pratyaksh, which is perception or direct apprehension. Pratyaksh comes from Prati meaning towards and Aksh meaning sense organs. So it literally refers to what comes directly through the sense organs to awareness. Knowledge gained through the five senses, which are eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, or through internal perception. That is known as Pratyaksh. So when we have direct, and particularly when they talk about Pratyaksh, it is considered to be direct knowledge. This direct knowledge can come through our five sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue or skin, or through our internal perception, but it has to be direct. And the process in which it takes place is when our sense organs comes in contact with the object. And this contact which is taking place between our sense organs and the object is an immediate and direct. So perception or pratyaksh is therefore considered to be direct apprehension, wherein the sense organs are coming immediately or directly in contact with the objects. All philosophical schools accept perception as a valid means of knowledge. Though they debate its exact nature and reliability, but all of them accept perception as a valid means of knowledge. Different schools had different views about what exactly happens in perception and what are the different levels of perception. But it is important to note that all the schools accept perception as a valid means of knowledge. So talking about different levels of perception, if we talk about, let us discuss the Nyaya school, which identified two phases of perception. These two phases of perception are Nirvikalpika perception or indefinite perception. This is the initial stage before any conceptualization takes place. It is merely the first impression, the unprocessed sensory input. In the second stage, known as Savikalpika perception or determined perception, we identify and make sense of what we see. For example, we see a tree, a book, and a person rather than merely patches of colors. So, these are the stages of perception talked about by the Nyaya school. So, when we see something, so as we were discussing that in perception, the sense organs come in contact directly with the object. So, when this sense organs or sense object contact takes place, the perception according to the Nyaya school happens in two phases. In the first phase, it's mere perception, wherein it's the initial stage, and at this stage we did not conceptualize what we are really seeing. It's just mere impression, first impressions, and these inputs are unprocessed. It is in the second stage, which is the Savikalpika perception, that we try to make sense of what we are seeing. So we identify and make sense of, let's say, colors, different patterns, structure, and come to realize that, okay, this is a tree. So In the first phase, we saw that there is something. In the second stage, we identified that this is a mango tree or a banana tree, etc. So this is the phase where we have now conceptualized what we are seeing, and it's a more advanced stage of perception in contrast to the Nivikalpika perception, where it's mere impressions and no conceptualization has taken place yet. So now, in order to conceptualize the raw data, prior knowledge and linguistic concepts are applied. So Nyaya philosophers acknowledged that the indeterminate stage is very short and it soon gives way to conceptualization. But they maintained that both stages are required for complete perceptual knowledge. And because there is such a small gap between Nirvikalpika to the Savikalpika perception, it's hard to make that distinction. And some schools accept or criticize, I would say, this distinction between Nirvikalpika and Savikalpika perception, and say that perception is Savikalpika. When you are perceiving something, you are conceptualizing what you are seeing. Now, moving forward, the second major praman is Anuman, which we translate as inference or reasoning. While perception gives us direct knowledge of what's present to our senses, inference allows us to know things that are not directly perceptible. So the classic example of inference is when you see smoke at a distant hill, you infer fire, even though you can't see the fire directly, but it is from your previous experiences that you can now relate what you are seeing to what you are not seeing. So here we can see that it's not direct perception, because here you are not seeing the fire, you are just seeing the smoke. So all schools except the Charvak materialists accept inference as valid, recognizing that we couldn't function without it. Science depends on inference, as does ordinary reasoning about cause and effect, predictions about the future based on the past experiences, and understanding relationships between things. For all these things, inference as a means is applied, because there are things which we cannot directly perceive. If these things were directly perceptible, then we wouldn't require another means of knowledge. So we see that in inference, there is something which is unseen, there is something which is not directly available to us. And we need to use our memory, we need to use our previous experiences to now relate to what is the cause and effect relationship here. We also predict what the future would be based on what has been our past experiences, and also it helps us in understanding the relationship between different things. So the Nyaya school developed an elaborate theory of inference that's remarkably sophisticated. They identified 5 members or steps of valid inference, which we can illustrate with the classic example of inferring fire from smoke. The first member of this inference is pratigya, or proposition, that is the claim that you are making. What is that claim? The claim is there is fire on the hill. This is something that we want to establish, or this is something that we are claiming. It's like an hypothesis. The second member is hetu, which is the reason and the evidence you are citing. So, you would say because there is smoke. So, the hypothesis was there is fire on the hill. The reason that you are giving now is because there is smoke there. The third member is the udharan, which is an example, a universal relationship supported by observed instances. So, wherever there is smoke, there is fire, as in the kitchen. So, we are giving this example here that we have seen that in the kitchen, whenever there is smoke, there is fire. So, we have given the reason in the second level of our inference. Now, the third is udharan, we gave an example. Then the fourth is upanay, which is application. So, connecting the general rule to the specific case. Specific case here is the hill. So, this hill has smoke which is invariably associated with fire. Therefore, the fifth member is the nigaman or conclusion, reaffirming the original claim, that is, therefore, there is fire on that hill based on these 5 steps of inference. The third major praman is shabd, which can translate as verbal testimony or authoritative testimony or a reliable testimony. This is knowledge gained from the statements of trustworthy person or a reliable source. Nyaya school outlined a number of requirements for who is a trustworthy person. First, the speaker ought to be apta. Apta means a reliable individual with first-hand knowledge of the subject matter and no desire to mislead. This eliminates both intentional lies and sincere errors. Secondly, the speaker needs to be speaking in their area of competence. Third, the listener must comprehend the communication accurately, eliminating the possibility of misunderstanding. Fourth, the testimony cannot be undermined by opposing evidences or defeating conditions. Mimamsa school claim that the Vedas are the exceptional instances of Shabda that doesn't even need a personal or author. They maintained that the Vedas are Aparushya, meaning they are eternal and were not written by any human or divine entity. The meaning of Vedic mantras is intrinsically linked to their sounds, independent of any agent's choice of tradition. We'll continue this lecture further. We'll discuss about other means of knowledge and also what is Prama in different schools. So, continue with us. We will be discussing more about different Praman and Prama from different philosophical Indian schools. Thank you.